Hey guys, tonight we begin a journey into kitchens older than history, walking barefoot through ash and amber, where the line between cooking and catastrophe was always just one flickering flame away. You settle beside a flickering campfire, not yours, but one stoked by hands long turned to dust. The air smells like scorched meat, wet clay. And whatever that thing is, you always burn in the toaster. Ancient chefs, the original foodies, weren't flipping omelets. They were gambling with survival. With no recipes, no YouTube tutorials and zero health codes, every meal was a risky experiment in edible chemistry. And let's be honest, you probably wouldn't survive this. One misplaced root, one undercooked rodent, and it's lights out forever. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're crouched beside the flickering fire of a Paleolithic family. The mother is tending a spit-roasted bird of uncertain species. The father chips a stone blade, while two children argue over a beetle snack. There are no spoons, no written language. And yet, there's dinner. Fire is the oldest ingredient in human cooking. When our distant ancestors first tamed it, it transformed everything. Sure, it singed a few eyebrows and probably caused more than one unintentional marshmallowing of early hominids, but it also unlocked calories, killed parasites, and made meat something chewable, without looking like a lion. But it was also dangerous. One ember too close to a pile of dry grass, and your whole clan was having a flash roast funeral. Historians still argue whether fire was controlled gradually or stolen in a Prometheus-style miracle moment. Either way, once humans had it, they never let go even when it nearly cooked them into extinction. You examine a pile of old bones, charred black at the edges. These are the remnants of experimentation. Think of it as humanity's first food lab. Open flames, no safety goggles. Trial and error meant people died from undercooked shellfish or poison roots. But the survivors passed down their knowledge not in books, but in habits and muscle memory. Here's a fun one. Early humans sometimes used hot rocks dropped into water-filled pits to boil meat. Ingenious, right? Except when the rocks exploded, or the pit wasn't lined right and became a toxic soup of acidic soil. Congratulations, you've invented the world's first hazardous kitchen. You sniff the air, there's smoke. Yes, but also something sweet. That's honey. Even in 20,000 BC, someone was bold enough to stick a stick into a beehive. Maybe they were brave. Maybe they were just really hungry. That mixture of curiosity and desperation is how we started seasoning things. Early seasoning wasn't for flavor, though it was often accidental. Dirt clinging to roots, ash coating, meat herbs mashed underfoot. Sometimes delicious, sometimes deadly. Russian roulette with rosemary. Here's a quirky tidbit. In South Africa, archaeologists found 170,000-year-old evidence of roasted starch grains. Yep, even before agriculture, our ancestors were roasting plant bits, like they were hosting the worst tapas night ever. Not exactly MasterChef, but it shows one thing: food has always been central to survival and identity. Yet, even the best ancient meals carried risks. Did you know certain prehistoric nuts had to be bleached and roasted several times before they were safe to eat? Miss one step and boom, nausea, paralysis, or worse. You imagine some poor cave cousin being the test subject for that culinary trial. Hey Trog, try this one, tastes a little sharp, right? Now imagine this same trial and error process. across thousands of years. The slow accumulation of food wisdom built on error. These early chefs didn't disappear because they were bad at cooking. They vanished because their environments shifted faster than their recipes could evolve. And here's the twist. Sometimes they cooked themselves out of options. Overhunting, overharvesting, burning too much of the same kindling. They weren't just experimenting with fire. They were fueling a slow extinction. You shift closer to the fire, feeling the smoke sting your eyes. It's comforting, but also reminds you of how vulnerable early humans were. That cozy warmth, one wind gust away from disaster. That sizzling meat, possibly the last of its kind. That clever cooking technique, one poor harvest away from a cultural collapse. And still they cooked. They seasoned. They shared meals and told stories, probably about someone who ate the wrong mushroom and started speaking in goat. Food wasn't just fuel. It was identity ritual comfort. And that's what makes the slow fate of these ancient food cultures so bittersweet. Imagine a chef crafting the perfect roast lizard only for the climate to shift, wiping out lizards for miles. Imagine a tribe perfecting a slow-cooked root that's suddenly toxic after a flood, changes the soil chemistry. The recipes didn't fail, the world changed, and the chefs couldn't keep up. Historians still argue whether these disappearances were due to environment overexploitation or cultural shifts. The truth, probably all of the above. Add a pinch of volcano here, a dash of drought there, and you've got a recipe for extinction. Your eyelids grow heavy as you picture those quiet, smoky kitchens, caves, echoing with crackling flames and murmurs. Maybe the last dish was a triumph. Maybe it was an experiment gone wrong. Either way, the pot went cold and the story faded. Until now. You stretch out beside the imaginary fire, feeling the soft crunch of ash beneath your palms. Somewhere a bird chirps, or was that a frog? The flavors, the flames, the failures, they all swirl together in the sleepy stew of history. And the next course is just around the bend. You roll over on your bed, or in this case, on the imaginary bed of packed earth beside an ancient hearth, and you watch as shadows flicker across the cave walls. The people who once stirred these flames are long gone. But the question lingers in the smoke. Why? You follow the trail of a charred bone fragment, fossilized, forgotten, yet whispering a warning. This isn't just a story of extinction by mammoth stampede or falling rocks from the sky. It's subtler, quieter, a story of taste timing and unintended consequences. A slow simmering away of entire cultures. Over dinner, you see, cooking is never neutral. Every ingredient we choose, every tool we use, every flame we feed, it's all part of a survival strategy. But sometimes what feeds us can also finish us. Just like how eating ice cream every night seems like a good idea, until your pants develop trust issues. Early humans didn't just eat what they could find, they built rituals around it. Some foods were sacred, others taboo. That's where things get messy. Because when beliefs limit your menu, a bad year for your sacred food could mean mass hunger. No plan B when your God-approved fish stops showing up. Historians still argue whether such taboos were spiritual or based on early ecological wisdom. Maybe both. But there's a clear pattern. Cultures that tied their identity too tightly to one dish, one animal, or one cooking method often didn't adapt well when the winds changed or the rains didn't come. Now you're walking through an ancient site, a stone circles half buried in time. Archaeologists call it a food processing zone, which is just a fancy way of saying prehistoric kitchen counter. There are grooves in the rock where roots were ground and dark stains that hint at oils or blood. Someone cooked here regularly. Someone lived, laughed, and probably argued about who overcooked the hare again. You pick up a shard of pottery. Not quite round, not quite flat, with faint fingerprints baked into its surface. This piece of humble dishware might be the only remaining proof of a food tradition now extinct. Because here's the thing, extinction isn't just about animals disappearing. It's about habits dying too. Take for example the tradition of using tree bark ash in cooking. It sounds weird now, like seasoning your soup with campfire leftovers, but in many ancient cultures, ash added minerals and helped preserve food. Until one day, the trees that provided the perfect ash were all chopped down. Or maybe the smoke started killing people faster than the ash helped them. And just like that, an entire cooking method disappeared. You lean in toward an ancient roasting pit, now filled with dirt and beetle husks. It tells a story of transition, of someone saying, "This used to work. Now it doesn't." Maybe they tried adapting. Maybe they moved. Or maybe they clung to tradition until the food ran out. Quirky detail for tonight: in a prehistoric settlement in Northern Europe, archaeologists found remains of a bread-like substance made from cattail pollen. Yes, the same stuff you see floating in the air like yellow dust clouds. Imagine baking bread from plant dust. Desperate maybe, brilliant definitely, but also incredibly fragile. One flood wiping out cattail beds and there goes your pantry. So what happens when these food wastes vanish? It's not like people held press conferences back then. There were no hashtags mourning the loss of hazelnut-fed river boars or ceremonial millet pudding. The culture just went quiet. The fire went out. And nature reclaimed the space. You brush your fingers along a wall where ancient soot still lingers. The carbon in that black smudge could be from a cooking fire 10,000 years ago. Maybe it belonged to a woman who invented the perfect bone marrow stew, or a child who dropped the family's last root vegetable into the flames. Either way, that mark outlived them. That smudge that burned that mistake or masterpiece, it's all that remains. Which brings us to the quiet irony. The very thing that fed ancient communities could also be the thing that buried them. Overhunting animals for feasts. Burning too many trees to cook flatbread. Harvesting the same field until the soil gave up and said, "You know what, I'm out." You hear a rustle behind you, a modern hiker perhaps, or a foraging squirrel. Either way, it reminds you that this isn't just past tense. The story of extinction through cuisine is ongoing. It's still happening. Just swap roasted boar for single-use plastics and the tale doesn't sound so ancient anymore. And let's not forget, sometimes entire groups of people simply disappeared from the map and all we're left with are scorched tools, stubborn crop imprints, and the odd skeleton with a cooking pot still nearby. We dig up their kitchens and try to reverse engineer their lives like ancient culinary detectives. Historians still argue whether climate or culture was the main culprit in these food-based disappearances. Was it the relentless march of ice sheets or the inflexibility of tradition? Maybe a little of both. Or maybe, just maybe, the food tasted so bad it drove them all away. Kidding, mostly. As you recline into the rhythm of this old smoky world, you begin to notice how every extinction leaves behind crumbs, fossilized seeds, burned out ovens, soot-stained ceilings. We follow those crumbs like bedtime breadcrumbs, each one guiding us deeper into the soft shadows of history. Tonight, as you drift beside this imaginary fire, remember that the next time you burn a grilled cheese or overdo the microwave popcorn, you're part of a very long tradition of humans getting food wrong. But unlike some of our ancestors, you have a fridge, a phone, and fewer saber-toothed tigers lurking by your pantry. You close your eyes as the soft crackle of prehistoric flames hums in your ears. A little wind, a whisper of ash, and the lingering taste of something ancient on the tip of your imagination. Your fingers trail the edge of a stone mortar as the story pulls you further in. The scent of roasted something or maybe nothing, just the ghost of it still hangs in the air. You're in a marshy wetland now, squelching softly through thick reeds. The landscape is alive, but its history is full of endings. Because when the menu doesn't change, but the environment does, someone always goes hungry. You pause on a patch of dry ground where once a thriving culture built homes on stilts and cooked fish over open flames. The fish, now long gone, were once abundant, fat, sleek, easy to trap. But what the chefs didn't realize was that their clever traps were too effective. They weren't just fishing. They were fishing themselves into famine. It's the tale of the Ertugrul people, Northern Europe's Mesolithic marsh dwellers. These early settlers had ingenious basket-weaving techniques to catch eels and fish in massive quantities. At first, it was a feast. Then it became survival. And finally, silence. The fish stocks collapsed and so did the society. Historians still argue whether it was overfishing alone or a creeping shift in climate that sealed their fate. Either way, the ovens went cold. You crouch beside a wooden fish hook, preserved in peat and thyme. It's surprisingly elegant, hand-carved, smoothed with care. Someone made this. Someone thought it would feed their children. And for a while, it did. But nature doesn't care how well you carve. When the fish are gone, they're gone. Just imagine you're the last person in your community who knows how to prepare fermented swampfish, a delicacy once celebrated. You've got the brine, the carved bowls, the herbs dried in bundles on the wall, but no fish. Just the memory of taste flickering behind your teeth like a song you can't quite hum. It's a haunting idea that you could hold all the knowledge, all the skills, all the right tools, and still go extinct because the ingredients didn't show up. Here's a quirky nugget for your dream basket. In some marshland settlements, early chefs used heated rocks, dropped into wooden vessels to boil water and stew fish. No metal pots, just wood and stone, like the world's most dangerous soup starter kit. One miscalculation and it's rock stew for dinner. Again, as you wander through the wet grass, the squish of your footsteps starts to echo like chewing, like a feast you weren't invited to, or maybe one that ended centuries before you arrived. Let's talk about soil now, because food isn't just about what you catch, it's also about what you grow, and that means understanding the dirt. Some ancient chefs were brilliant soil scientists without even knowing the word. Others, not so much. Picture this, you're part of a farming tribe that's just discovered a particularly fertile patch of earth. You grow millet, barley, maybe even early forms of wheat. Life is good. The food is plenty. So you do what anyone would do, you stay put and farm harder. But the soil, it's a diva. Treat it wrong and it shuts down on you. Just a few bad cycles of planting the same crop and boom, nothing grows. Nutrients vanish. Topsoil erodes. And suddenly, you're not a farmer. You're a mover. It's believed that some Neolithic farming communities vanished this way, cooked their land until it couldn't cook anything back. Historians still argue whether their fall was fast and shocking or a slow starvation people didn't notice until it was too late. Either way, the plates emptied, the fires faded, and the forests returned to swallow the evidence. Back to the wetlands. You see the remains of wooden platforms now fossilized into peat. These were ancient kitchens above the water places of life laughter and elaborate eel pots. Now they're sinking slowly, sweetly into the muck. Nature's way of saying thanks for playing. And what of the chefs themselves? You'd think food experts would be the last to go. But ironically, culinary expertise can be a double-edged blade. Specialization means you're very good at one thing, until that thing isn't available. Like a sushi master trapped in a desert. One such tale whispers from the swamps of North America, where some pre-Columbian tribes focused heavily on processing acorns, a bitter nut, but full of potential if you knew how to leach the tannins. They built entire food economies around it. Until droughts hit, oak populations dropped, or invading cultures disrupted the rhythm. Suddenly, no acorns, no leaching, no lunch. You stop at a clearing that smells faintly of decay and sweetgrass. In the center, a ring of stones blackened by thousands of small fires. It might have been a family kitchen, or a ceremonial one. You imagine a young woman stooped over a bubbling pot, tasting with a carved spoon, debating whether to add more crushed root or to sneak in that forbidden pinch of meat fat from the forest. The wind shifts, a soft ripple of scent you can't quite place. Maybe ancient herbs, maybe just your own memory playing tricks. But it reminds you of something you've always known: food is fragile. Recipes are instructions, yes, but they're also trust and timing and land. And when any of those break, the whole dish can collapse. You walk now beside a narrow river. Once this stream was a grocery store. Fresh fish, tender roots, edible reeds. But now the banks have shifted. The fish are fewer. And somewhere upstream, a dam beaver-made or human-built has changed everything. These are the subtle shifts that erase traditions. And so the wetland chefs faded, not in flames or violence, but in slow, muddy footsteps. Their stoves turned to stone, their recipes to rumors. You lie down in the soft grass, half damp with dew, and stare at the low clouds. Above you a hawk circles. Below you in the soil 1,000 forgotten meals have long since turned to silt. Remember, this extinction doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it comes with a missed season, a failed harvest, a recipe that no longer works. And when it does, the last thing to go is the taste memory, haunting someone who remembers how good it used to be. You let out a soft breath, the kind of breath someone might have sighed after losing the last fish trap to the current. Tomorrow there will be more discoveries, more kitchens unearthed. But tonight you rest in the quiet, soot-scented hush of a world that slowly boiled itself away. You're walking now along a windswept ridge, shoes crunching on crumbled stones that once framed a thriving town. The breeze tastes of old ash and forgotten grain. You're in the middle of a vanished settlement where chefs once balanced flavor and survival, and where, just maybe, they lost track of one trying too hard to serve the other. Below you lies the ghost of Çatalhöyük, one of the oldest known cities nestled in what's now Turkey. Thousands lived here. Tight-knit communities, mud brick homes, rooftop passageways, and yes, a bustling culture of domestic cooking. You imagine walking across those roof paths, balancing a clay pot full of barley stew, dodging a neighbor's drying laundry, and someone else's runaway goat. Smells of cooked legumes, maybe some grilled meat if the spirits were generous. Here's the thing, these people knew food. They cultivated grains, herded animals, and even made cheese, some of the earliest evidence of it in fact. But as populations grew and habits deepened, something changed. They kept cooking the same things. They stayed put. And well, the earth didn't love that. Agricultural overuse, deforestation, and increasingly cramped living conditions made it hard to sustain the feast. The more they farmed, the least the soil gave. The more they built, the fewer trees stood to protect the ecosystem. Historians still argue whether drought or disease played a bigger role, but either way, Çatalhöyük lost its flavor. You step into the outline of an old kitchen marked now only by a shallow depression in the earth and the faintest glint of obsidian tools. Someone sharpened those daily. Someone ground seeds against the slab beside it. Probably grumbled about the cost of lentils. And then one day, stopped. Let's stir in a strange fact. In these ancient homes, ovens weren't tucked away in kitchens. They were central features, often right where families slept. Cozy or smoky, probably both. You'd wake up to the scent of baking bread. Or smother in it if the ventilation wasn't right. A domestic dream or an ashy disaster. That's commitment. And you know what's particularly eerie? There's evidence these people practiced ritual cooking. Not just everyday meals, but elaborate dishes for the dead. Food was a sacred offering left beside buried ancestors under the floorboards. Yup, that comforting warmth underfoot might have been grandma. But sacred recipes didn't save them. When the environment collapsed, so did the traditions. The last generation of Çatalhöyük chefs likely clung to their inherited techniques even as crop yields shrank and livestock struggled. It's hard to change how you cook when your grandmother's stew was perfection. Harder still when you realize the herbs she used don't grow anymore. You kick a small rock, it skitters down into the ruins. Maybe someone did the same, frustrated with another failed harvest, another bland porridge bowl. Even history gets hangry. A few steps on and you're looking at a small pit with bits of charcoal. You imagine someone squatting here at dusk, stirring a slow meal over a flickering flame, maybe adding precious spices one by one, hoping to preserve the family taste in a world that wasn't cooperating anymore. The wind keeps changing as if carrying whispers of forgotten recipes. Let's get even weirder. There's a theory whispered among fringe scholars and amateur dreamers that some of these communities developed kitchen taboos. Recipes and food processes that were locked away, considered sacred or dangerous to get wrong. It's possible that when the elders died off the correct order of mixing, fermenting, boiling, all that culinary code vanished with them. So even if the ingredients survived, the how didn't. Like owning a piano but forgetting every note, you begin to feel the pressure. Not of time exactly, but of repetition. Imagine cooking the same meal every day for decades. Then suddenly one ingredient goes extinct. You try substitution, some local root, a tougher grain, but it doesn't taste right. So you try harder. You grind it longer, cook it hotter. Eventually, you convince yourself this is still grandma's stew. It's not. But by then, no one remembers what the original tasted like. You pass a stone wall with faint etchings. Possibly decorative, possibly instructions. Who knows, it might have been a warning. Don't cook the rye this way. Or just the ancient version of hot surface. And as you walk, it hits. Specialization can be a trap. If your entire diet revolves around 3 crops and 2 animals, you're not resilient. You're betting your future on 5 things. When the weather changes, the rivers shift, or the animals migrate, your whole world collapses faster than a soggy flatbread. That's what happened here. They built lives around what worked. Until it didn't, the food traditions didn't evolve with the land they resisted. And the chefs, the ones who should have led innovation, clung tight to the old spice rack. You crouch beside a clay fragment. Maybe it was once a bowl. Maybe it held a festival dish, the kind passed down through generations. The kind no one knows how to make anymore. And it dawns on you slowly, sadly, that extinction doesn't just mean bodies disappearing. It means flavors vanishing. It means the last time someone tasted a soup their ancestors perfected over centuries was hundreds of years ago. And they didn't even know it was the last time. But let's not get too gloomy. People adapt. Eventually, survivors moved on. They built new settlements, tried new recipes. But what stayed buried here was the particular style, the blend of ritual environment and flavor that made this city unique. You close your eyes for a moment. You can almost hear someone pounding grain into flour. You can feel the heat of the heart on your toes. You can smell the stew, earthy, spiced thick with meaning. And then it's gone. That's how culinary extinction works. It's not a bang. It's a simmer. You descend a slope. Now dry grass, brushing against your ankles toward the edge of a shimmery marsh. Frogs chirp. Reeds sway. And for a brief moment it smells rich, sweet almost, like something ancient was just boiled here and left to cool. This was once a haven for wetland dwellers, resourceful chefs who could turn swamp slime into survival. Tonight you're visiting the Mesolithic foragers of Starkar, England 11,000 years ago. Picture a lakeside camp ringed with birch trees and buzzing with mosquitoes the size of grapes. The humans, skinny, sinewy, sharp-eyed, walking barefoot on wooden platforms, stretched across the soggy shoreline. Think of them as nature's test kitchen crew. What did they cook exactly? Pretty much anything they could drag out of the water. Fish, obviously, but also birds, eels, beavers, and even elk, which to be fair is more roast-worthy than it sounds. One dig revealed dozens of burnt antlers, suggesting not just hunting, but feasting. This wasn't a cold, calculated butcher shop. It was dinner and a show. But here's the twist. These folks didn't leave much in the way of pots or hearths. So how did they cook? Well, we think they used hot stones plunged into pits of water. A kind of prehistoric sous vide. Picture it, someone drops a trout into a birch bark basket, adds a few herbs, then starts chucking in steaming hot rocks. 10 minutes later, poached perfection. No kitchen, no fire hazard. Just a lakeside spa day for your dinner. Mainstream historians praise this technique as proof of human adaptability. But fringe thinkers go further. Some even speculate these people understood seasonal fermentation. Yep, fish sauces. The kind that would curdle your nose hairs. Imagine storing rotted pike guts in clay jars and drizzling it over roasted duckweed. Bon appétit. And here's a fun fact. Starkar yielded some of the earliest known headdresses made from red deer skulls. Experts still debate their use, hunting disguises, ceremonial garb, fashion-forward picnic attire. One theory suggests they were used by ritual chefs, culinary shamans who summoned good flavors with antlered flair. It's far-fetched, sure. But can you really say no to the idea of a swamp sorcerer stirring bone broth in a feathered crown? Still, even these swamp-savvy chefs met their end. Why the water changed? Peat began to form, clogging the edges of the lake. Fish moved deeper. Fires wouldn't light. The marsh became a maze of thick, acidic slop. Cooking here wasn't impossible, but it was a nightmare. No clean water, no dry wood, and the eels got weirder by the year. And yet, they tried. You can imagine someone stubbornly pulling out another slimy pike, muttering it was better last season, and dragging it to a smoking pit that no longer smoked. Maybe they kept fishing long after it stopped making sense. convinced the old ways still worked. Spoiler, they didn't. Here's where it gets spooky. Historians still argue whether climate or overuse was the main culprit. Was it just natural ecological succession? Or did generations of machine burning and cooking actually change the wetlands? Maybe the very thing that kept them alive, the endless fishing and boiling, slowly ruined the ecosystem they depended on. And this is the quiet heartbreak of culinary extinction. Not drama, not dragons. Just, your soup gets worse every year, and you keep eating it, hoping it'll get better. You step onto a mossy patch. It squishes reluctantly. You imagine a teenager from Starcar, rolling their eyes at yet another bowl of eel stew. Can't we just not eat something fermented for once? But tradition holds fast. Recipes are more than food, they're memory, identity, sacred ritual. Breaking from them isn't just culinary treason, it's spiritual divorce. So they kept their customs, boiled their fish, fermented their questionable sauces, and slowly cooked themselves into irrelevance. Some tried to adapt. There's evidence that settlements moved further inland away from the marsh. But without the fish, without the water, their recipes didn't work. You can't poach trout in a pine forest. And so, bit by bit, the culinary culture unraveled. You pass an impression in the mud, could be a deer print or a footprint from long ago. Someone stood here, maybe tossing hot rocks into a basket of broth, watching steam rise, hoping for a taste that reminded them of childhood, of family, of the time when the water still shimmered and frogs weren't radioactive. But those memories don't feed you. And here's a strange, lingering thought. There are no written recipes from these people. No stone tablets saying soak the perch overnight in brine. Serve with grassroot garnish. Every technique, every flavor was passed through demonstration and repetition. So when one generation forgot or fled, the entire cookbook collapsed. You start to wonder how many recipes have gone extinct like this. Not because of war or plague, but because someone moved inland, or ran out of fish, or got bored of fermented goose. And suddenly you feel it again. The ache of loss, not for people, but for flavor. The deep, swampy umami that once filled this space is gone. There's no restaurant on earth that can replicate a Starcar stew. Even if we knew the ingredients, we've lost the air, the water, the specific terroir of ancient marshland cooking. You kneel beside a rotted log. There's a tiny beetle clinging to it. Life goes on here, of course, but it doesn't taste the same. That's the quiet extinction of taste. Not an explosion, not a famine, just a slow simmer of absence, like chewing a memory that never quite comes back. You leave the bog behind, stepping onto firmer ground. The air changes, less wet moss, more charred wood and dry ash. A hint of burnt grain wafts through, though it's hard to say whether it's real or just imagination. Either way, you're not in a forest anymore. You've wandered into the first real kitchen city, Çatalhöyük. This was once a place where smoke curled from 1,000 clay ovens. Southern Anatolia, $9,000 years ago. One of the first known proto-urban settlements. And here the chefs did more than forage they cultivated. Wheat, lentils, peas, goat, yes goat. That versatile, slightly judgmental beast. You can almost see it, a cluster of mud brick homes, each one with its own hearth, its own pots and cooking tools. There were no streets, just rooftops you walked across like a communal patio maze. And beneath those rooftops, kitchens humming with early culinary ambition. You, a time-traveling observer with excellent posture and very modern taste buds, duck into one of the homes. There's a woman grinding grain by hand, her upper arms carved with years of muscle memory. She's probably been grinding since before she could walk. Next to her, a fire pit, its stones, blackened from thousands of stews. A child pokes dried goat dung into the flames to keep them burning. Yes, goat poop was fuel. It's not glamorous, but neither is gas. The menu: think earthy and earnest grain, porridge, lentil stew, flatbreads baked on dome-shaped griddles. Occasionally, a goat roast if they could spare one. Or maybe a dish that's basically yogurt with ambitions. Some proto-cheese, made by leaving milk in a pot for a little too long. Mainstream archaeologists admire Çatalhöyük's efficient food systems. But of course, there are fringe theories too. Some believe they pioneered early fermentation on purpose, that they had proto-beer, that they flavored their porridges with herbs, not just for taste, but ritual. Did they add wild thyme to honor the dead, or fennel to boost dreams? You'll never know, but it makes your nose tingle just thinking about it. Here's the quirky bit. Burials happened under the floors. You might be cooking a stew directly over Grandma, or Uncle Mert, or someone with strong opinions about seasoning. Did this proximity to ancestors shape their food rituals? Did they whisper a pinch more salt? From beyond the grave, you smile, half uneasy, half hungry. But not all is warm bread and sleepy spice. Over time, something shifts. The kitchens that once nourished become smoky tombs. Respiratory damage in bones suggests people inhaled far too much smoke indoors. The grain diet. Nutritious, yes, was also greedy, full of tiny stones from the grinding process. Their teeth wore down fast. Imagine being 25 with the dental condition of a retired pirate. And then there's the overfarming. The goats, once friendly providers of milk and evening bleats, began stripping the land. Overgrazing, deforestation, dust. The fertility of the land shrank. Suddenly, your lentils don't sprout. Your wheat grows thin. The hearth still burns, but there's nothing worth cooking. Historians still argue whether environmental strain or social pressure was the true undoing of Çatalhöyük. Was it climate shift over population, a changing palate that the old recipes couldn't satisfy? Or maybe they just got tired of flatbread. And here's where you feel it, that existential kitchen fatigue. The collapse doesn't happen in a day. It's in the little things. Less firewood, more soot. Kids who'd rather chew raw barley than help stir the pot. Neighbors who used to share herbs now hoard them. One day you look around and your community of chefs has become a city of exhausted reheaters. You step outside onto the dusty rooftops. The sun bakes the clay, casting long shadows between the homes. You picture a mother once proud of her lentil stew, now throwing together a joyless gruel with whatever she can find. Her daughter refuses to eat it. Her husband mutters about the good old days. And somewhere below the bones of her ancestors lie silent, no longer offering seasoning tips. Even the architecture changes. Over time, newer homes seem less focused on kitchen space, less ceremonial, more utilitarian, like the joy of cooking had drained out of them. When a culture stops innovating in the kitchen, you can bet its heart is flickering. By now, Çatalhöyük is shrinking. People are moving on, maybe north, maybe west, taking a few recipes with them, forgetting others. It's not a fall. It's a slow forgetting, one that starts with the taste buds and ends with silence. You crouch beside a fire pit. There are soot marks still visible on the stones. You press a finger into the ash, still warm in your imagination, but fading, like the memory of a dish your grandmother once made, just out of reach. And now you're wondering if you lived here, What recipe would you have passed down? What flavor would be so essential to your identity that losing it would feel like death? Flatbread lentils, fermented goat yogurt with surprise herbs. Whatever it was, it's gone now. Swept away not by war but by a slow erosion of purpose. An extinction not of species but of spice, of subtlety, of soul. And that's the quiet horror of being cooked into extinction. You don't even notice it's happening until the last stew tastes like ash and there's no one left to complain. You walk away from Catalhoyuk with a strange aftertaste. Dusty lentils and maybe a bit of ancestral disappointment. But your path ahead takes you out of Anatolia, across mountain ridges and sun-bleached plains to where cooking gets a bit wilder, more primal. Less Grandma's heart, more Iron Age food fight. Now you're somewhere in Iron Age Europe. A Celtic settlement, timber frame homes, thatched roofs, smoke curling up into a rainy gray sky. This is not your typical rustic scene. These folks are serious about their food and their power. Because in this world, what you eat is a statement. Every bite is political. You peek into a chieftain's hut. He's sitting cross-legged on a fur rug, gnawing on something charred, while a bard sings his praises with half rhymes and full bravado. You, of course, are invisible as always, so you can tiptoe closer and peek at the dish. It's meat, lots of it, boiled pork, spitted boar, and something called black pudding which you really don't want to ask about. There's ale, naturally, and big slabs of bread soaked in gravy. The elite ate like gods. But here's the twist, they didn't cook it themselves. That honor went to chefs. Yes, even here, culinary specialization had emerged. The ancient Celts are a fascinating lot. Mainstream history tells us they had a sophisticated social hierarchy. They were master metalworkers, fierce warriors. But fringe researchers love to focus on their banquets, especially the claim that certain chefs held magical status. Cooking was more than nourishment. It was ritual, symbol, control. Ever heard of the champion's portion? It was the choicest cut of meat, reserved for the bravest warrior at the feast. But handing it out could trigger full-on brawls. One wrong slice and suddenly, your pork roast becomes a cause for tribal war. There are tales of entire villages being burned over a misallocated rib. It's food politics with bone handles. You follow a younger chef no older than 17 as he sharpens his bronze knife with obsessive care. He knows today's meal could determine tomorrow's blood feud. His kitchen, a half-open shed, full of smoke, sizzling fat, and something vaguely herbal hanging from the rafters. Not decorative, these are flavor bombs. Wild leeks, sorrel, maybe even mugwort. A name that sounds like a medieval insult, but actually adds bitterness to meat stew. And then there's the bread. Oh, the bread. Coarse, chewy, full of spelt and barley, sometimes sprinkled with tiny bits of groundstone, accidental but oddly crunchy. There's cheese, 2 hard wheels wrapped in animal skins and aged in underground pits. You bite into a mental slice. It's pungent, funky, possibly illegal in 6 modern countries. But not everyone gets a taste. Beyond the chief's fire, there are the common folk. They scrape charred porridge off clay pots, chew wild roots, and hope for leftover marrow bones. The gap between rich and poor is wide and you feel it in your belly. It's not just about hunger, it's about being left out of flavor. Now here's where the tragedy simmers. Over time, the Celtic world shrinks. Not because they forgot how to boil a boar, but because of another hungry force Rome. The Romans arrive like a food truck with imperial branding. Olives, wine, garum the fish sauce of nightmares. They bring ovens, roads, laws, and crucifixion, but also recipes, and a strict new culinary order. Suddenly, native chefs are either adapting or disappearing. You go from roasting on open fires to cooking Roman style in ceramic pots, from barley beer to wine, from ritual meat feasts to standardized rations. The magic drains out of the kitchen. The champion's portion becomes a tax. Flavor becomes law. Historians still argue whether Celtic culinary extinction was forced or voluntary. Did they give up their food waste to survive, or were they seduced by olive oil and indoor plumbing? The truth, like most stews, is probably a mix. Some communities resist. They keep their cooking traditions alive in secret, like edible rebellion. A hidden herb pouch here. A forgotten recipe passed down as a lullaby. But with each generation, the fire dims. There's a fringe theory that some of these Celtic chefs fled to remote isles and kept their traditions going disguised as folklore. That the banshee's wail was once just a cook warning her stew was burning. That the green man was really a forest herb peddler. Charming, if a little spicy on the imagination. And so you drift away from the fading Celtic kitchens, the smoke of their meat feasts, thinning into the mist. What you leave behind is not just a lost cuisine, it's a lost worldview. One where food was valor, where seasoning was sovereignty, and where a slice of boar could make or break a kingdom. You wander past crumbled fire pits, broken pots, and a few forgotten herbs, still sprouting wild among the ruins. The past doesn't vanish all at once. It lingers in bitter roots and smoky memories. You taste it, and then it's gone. You walk with the wind, now faster, lighter, drifting southward through centuries past the empires that rise like soufflés and collapse just as quickly. Your feet carry you to the Mediterranean, where warm breezes lift the scent of lemon thyme and charcoal grilled fish. This is a new world of culinary finesse, of balance and refinement, of restraint. Which you're beginning to suspect is just ancient code, for we ran out of boars. Welcome to classical Greece. Here, food is no longer a battlefield, it's a philosophy. You pass through white stone courtyards echoing with laughter and the clink of clay cups as thinkers lounge on marble benches debating not just politics or metaphysics but dinner. Plato himself once argued for simplicity in diet: vegetables, grains, clean water, claiming rich food weakens the soul. You're not sure if that was wisdom or just a bad reaction to spoiled anchovies. You find yourself trailing a modest cook through the shaded alleys of Athens. She wears a linen tunic, a little stained hair tied back with a string of fig bark. In one hand, she carries a small amphora of olive oil, like it's a sacred relic. In the other, fresh goat cheese, wrapped in fig leaves. Her fire is clean, her touch careful. You realize she isn't just cooking, she's composing. Mainstream historians will tell you Greek cuisine was all about moderation: olives, barley bread, fish, wine, watered down like a weak opinion. But that's the public face of it. The Olympic ideal. The truth hiding behind temple walls and down garden lanes is far more decadent. You catch glimpses of honey-drenched pastries, stacked in pyramid towers, spit-roasted lamb seasoned with coriander and vinegar, even delicate pastries shaped like birds. The Greeks may have philosophized restraint, but when they partied, Dionysus took the wheel, and in the middle of it all, like a minor deity, with stained fingers and a soot-smudged face, stands the chef, an often enslaved artisan, not always free but vital, respected in secret. Because when the city wanted to impress a visiting general or woo a rival politician, who did they call not a soldier, not a sculptor? They called in the flavor brigade. Here's a fringe tidbit. One Athenian cookbook, long lost except for fragments, describe a sauce so complex, with over 12 ingredients and a precise boiling rhythm, that some scholars believe it functioned as a kind of culinary code. Not just a recipe, but a message. Perhaps for spies, or lovers, or both. Cooking was performance, persuasion, even espionage. You take a moment to inhale that sauce. Your imaginary nose filled with the sweet savory steam of honey, vinegar, fennel, mint, and some fishy depth you can't quite place. It curls like incense into your thoughts. But as with all good things, the candle burns low. Greece begins to fracture under pressure from outside forces, Persians, Macedonians, and eventually, yes, those tomatoless upstarts from Rome. And the chefs, they vanish not in a blaze of glory, but in a soft fade. Their recipes are copied, stolen, and Romanized. Their names, if they were ever written down, disappear into soot and ash. Their cooking techniques get absorbed into empire. There is no war cry, just the hush of a last stew left untended. Historians still argue whether this loss of culinary individuality was the result of cultural blending or erasure. Did Greek chefs willingly fold into Roman kitchens for survival? Or were their methods overwritten like footnotes in a conquering manuscript? You walk past an abandoned stone hearth cool now. A few herb stems wilt in an ancient clay jar. A drop of oil clings to the lip like a memory refusing to let go. But the extinction isn't total. In pockets of the countryside, you find traces fermented goat milk, stirred in earthenware pots, spiced lentil cakes, crisped on river stones, pickled grape leaves rolled by hand. Grandmothers become the last archivists. Children hum lullabies that once mapped spice ratios. And yet their kitchens grow quieter. Philosophy rises. The idea that food should not overwhelm the senses, that it should serve the intellect, takes root. A noble thought, perhaps, but a dangerous one for chefs who once whispered flavor like poetry. You pass a faded mural, men reclining with figs, women dancing with loaves of bread. One corner of the wall has chipped away, revealing the bare stone beneath. Just like the chefs you followed, the art is vanishing. Softly, inevitably, you leave Greece with a whisper of time on your breath and a lingering sense that the olive oil is still simmering somewhere. Maybe not here, but somewhere. You step lightly now across the Adriatic Sea and into a world of discipline and spectacle. The stone roads harden beneath your feet. Everything feels structured, measured, efficient, a little smug. This is Rome after all, and here, even the act of biting into an apple might involve a senator and a scroll. Rome doesn't cook. Rome commands. You're in a villa outside Pompeii pre-eruption, when the figs are ripe and the fountains gurgle with wine, allegedly. A chef, more servant than artist, moves briskly through a tiled kitchen, roasting dormice, stuffed with herbs, boiling fish in garum, and arranging dates soaked in honey on ceramic platters shaped like seashells. His eyes are steady, his hands fast. He's not allowed mistakes. Not when the guests are ranking officials and possibly minor gods. The Roman culinary world is a strange beast part, luxury part, logistics. The average citizen, porridge, maybe a few beans, a crust of bread. But the elite, their meals are edible architecture. You attend one of their infamous feasts, reclining, of course. There are courses, so many courses. Flamingo tongue, sea urchin pudding, peacocks refeathered after roasting so they can be served dressed. There's a salad made of 37 different greens, most of which are poisonous in excess. You politely decline, which is easy when you're invisible. Mainstream history paints Rome as the great preserver of Greek knowledge, and food was no exception. Roman cookbooks like Apicius collected recipes from around the empire, North Africa, Gaul, Syria, a melting pot, if you will. But within that pot, many ancient chefs got boiled away, nameless erased, replaced with Latin versions of themselves. Take Apicius himself, a legendary gourmand, perhaps fictional, who reportedly spent his entire fortune on food and then ended his life when the quality of his pantry declined. You respect the drama. But the cookbook that bears his name likely pulled from dozens of earlier chefs whose work was recopied without credit, diced and sautéed into the Roman brand. There's a fringe theory that some of these recipes were encoded with political dissent. A bitter herb ratio meant rebellion. The placement of fish scales pointed to corruption. Hidden flavors with dangerous implications. Conspiracy by cuisine. You sniff the stew suspiciously. You follow a culinary slave named Marius, who trained under 5 masters before being sold to a patrician family. His talent for balancing acid and fat, sweet and salt, has won him brief moments of favor, but his name never appears in records. His dishes earn applause. He earns silence. Historians still argue whether Rome's chefs had any true authorship. Were they inventors or just implementers? Did they shape Roman cuisine, or did the empire simply reshape them? At the height of power, Roman kitchens become industrialized. You visit a popina, a fast food stall near a forum. Hot trays of chickpeas, lentils, and fried fish. Workers and travelers eat standing, wiping grease on their tunics. It's cheap, fast, and impersonal. The chef here barely glances at his ingredients. You watch the slow creep of standardization, the way flavor is minimized for efficiency, how feasts become political tools, how creativity yields to spectacle. That's the dangerous bit. When the goal is to impress, not to nourish, things start tasting hollow. Then comes the fire, not metaphorical this time, literal. Cities burn. Invaders come. Roads crack. The aqueducts dry up. The grand kitchens are looted or abandoned. Some chefs escape with their tools and a few precious spice jars. Most do not. As the empire fractures, so does its culinary soul. The last banquets are held in echoing marble halls. The guests eat silently. No one praises the flavor. They're too busy checking the exits. But the cooks, those nameless artisans, who once made flamingo flambé with a side of satire, they vanish quietly, swallowed by history. Their cookbooks lost. Their sauces forgotten. Their garlic ratios erased like chalk in the rain. And yet the ghost of Rome's food lingers. In medieval monasteries, monks try to recreate Roman meals from memory. They get the wine right, but mess up the fish sauce. In some southern villages, ancient bread ovens still smolder with olive-scented embers. A few forgotten herbs bloom wildly like culinary fossils refusing extinction. You pass one such herb, silphium, or rather where it once grew, a prized seasoning aphrodisiac and rumored cure-all. Silphium was so beloved by Roman chefs that it was harvested to extinction. Gone. Just gone. Possibly the first ingredient ever to be loved out of existence. You kneel where it used to grow. The soil smells faintly sweet. Maybe it's still there somewhere beneath, dreaming of garlic and glory. Then the silence deepens. Rome has fallen. Its chefs are scattered. The fires are out. And the last roasted dormouse is cold. You move on. You wander now through shadowed forests and misty hills of early medieval Europe. What some call the Dark Ages, though you're starting to think that's just because their cooking wasn't Instagram-worthy. The great halls are colder, the feasts simpler, and the fires in the kitchens flicker low. The chefs here are monks, peasants, and wandering minstrels. Their cooking is fueled by necessity, more than artistry-root vegetables, grains, wild herbs foraged at dawn. Meat is rare, save for saints' days or invading armies. You catch a whiff of roasted boar from a village feast, but mostly it's pottage. A thick, salty stew that sticks to the ribs and clears the sinuses. You trail a monk named Brother Aldrich, whose monastery garden is a treasure trove of culinary survival. He tends rows of cabbage leeks and onions, as well as a patch of feverfew and lovage herbs thought to protect from plague and maybe bad cooking. His kitchen is a simple stone hut, with an open hearth where he simmers barley and smokes salted fish. Monastic cooking comes with rules. Fasting means no meat, no dairy, sometimes no oil. Talk about flavor restrictions. You try to imagine a meal without butter or cheese, and almost cry. Brother Aldrich offers you a sip of thin wine, half water, half hope. It's enough to keep going. Here's a mainstream fact. Medieval Europeans were surprisingly inventive with preservation, smoking, salting, pickling, and many techniques survived intact for centuries. Yet, the idea of a chef as a creator is still a distant dream. The cook is anonymous, a servant to the rules of piety and scarcity. There's a quirky twist though. In some villages, cooks began experimenting with fermentation, not just for bread or ale, but for vegetables. Sauerkraut emerges as a staple, a tangy survival hack that also wards off scurvy during long winters. Fermentation becomes a kind of alchemy, turning humble cabbage into a potent elixir. Historians still debate whether medieval cuisine was truly dark or simply misunderstood by later eras obsessed with Renaissance glamour. Was it bland or was it rustic elegance born from hardship? You find yourself leaning toward the latter, savoring the hearty warmth of a stew seasoned with wild garlic and smoked bacon fat. One evening, as a storm rattles the wooden shutters, you listen to tales of a mysterious recipe book, the Regimen Sanitatis Salernitanum, a medieval health guide, blending medicine and food advice. It prescribes not only what to eat, but when and how, merging nourishment and healing, a philosophy that hints cooking might still hold ancient secrets. Brother Aldrich pauses in his work to share a legend of a dish called salads. Early salads made from bitter greens and edible flowers served with vinegar and oil. It sounds fresh daring even. A glimmer of culinary curiosity breaking through the austerity. Yet the danger remains. Harsh winters, famines, and plagues decimate villages. Recipes are lost when cooks die or flee. The oral tradition is fragile, like smoke, disappearing into the night air. You walk the empty fields where wild herbs grow unchecked, the scent sharp and untamed. Somewhere in these simple meals and silent kitchens, the seeds of future culinary revival rest, waiting, buried in ashes and hope. You close your eyes and taste the smoky tang of cured pork, mingling with the earthiness of roots, the faint bitterness of wild greens, the thin sweetness of honey from a solitary beehive. The past may be silent, but it is not empty. The chefs have not vanished completely, they have merely retreated, waiting for the fire to rekindle. You step lightly into the blossoming world of the High Middle Ages, a time when Europe stirs with newfound energy and its kitchens follow suit. Castles rise, markets buzz, and the stirrings of trade bring new spices and ideas that flavor the continent's slow awakening. The medieval kitchen is no longer just survival. It begins flirting with luxury. You find yourself inside a noble's great hall, the stone walls echoing with the clatter of goblets and murmurs of anticipation. A team of cooks, busy and bustling, moves between enormous hearths and simmering cauldrons. Their hands deftly handle saffron, cinnamon, and ginger exotic luxuries transported by merchants from the far corners of the world. Here, the role of the chef grows clearer. No longer a mere servant, the head cook is a master orchestrator coordinating apprentices, sourcing rare ingredients, and presenting dishes designed to impress both palate and pride. Meals become theatrical events, swan roasts, spiced pies with golden crusts, jellied meats molded into bizarre shapes. You imagine the effort behind such spectacles. Someone had to test the recipes, taste the sauces, and balance the bitterness of herbs against the sweetness of fruit. The famous Le Viandier by Taillevent appears in this period, one of the earliest known European cookbooks, a sign that culinary knowledge is beginning to be recorded. This work is part art, part science, reflecting a culture keen to codify food as an essential part of courtly life. A quirky detail sneaks in medieval cooks, often used color as a culinary code. Blue food for mourning or magic, red for passion, gold for divine favor. They believed that eating certain colors could affect your body and soul, a kind of early food psychology, or perhaps a charming superstition. Historians still argue whether medieval chefs truly innovated or just borrowed lavishly from Arab and Byzantine traditions. You can't help but notice that many prized spices, cardamom, cumin, pepper, came via Muslim traders, weaving their flavors deep into European fare. You shadow a cook named Gisbert, whose pride is a savory pottage enriched with dried fruits, nuts, and sweet wine. He grumbles about the lack of fresh meat, but insists the layers of flavor tell a story of abundance despite hardship. But not all is golden crust and saffron. The rural kitchens remain humble stews, black bread and wild greens, while famine and disease still lurk nearby. Food scarcity forces chefs to adapt or disappear. It's a quiet extinction beneath the glittering tapestries. You pause outside a monastery kitchen, where the monks have refined brewing into an art form. Ale and mead bubble, gently becoming staples, not just for pleasure but for nutrition and medicine. This is a world beginning to grasp that food and drink are entwined with health, happiness, and culture. You take a deep breath and imagine the scents: roasting venison, baked apples, spiced with clove fresh herbs, drying on wooden beams. The kitchens hum with life possibility and a whisper of change. Yet the chefs' names remain elusive ghosts behind the smoke, their stories folded into the pages of dusty manuscripts or lost altogether. You step back, feeling the weight of centuries pressing gently but insistently on the humble flame that cooks these meals. It flickers, still a soft pulse in the dark. You slip now into the dawn of the Renaissance, a world awash with curiosity, art, and science. The kitchens of Europe awaken, like the cities brimming with experimentation, boldness, and a renewed hunger for discovery. The ancient art of cooking begins to morph into something recognizably modern, but with plenty of bumps along the way. You find yourself in Florence, where the Medici family rules not just the city but the culture itself. Their kitchens hum with activity, staffed by chefs whose ambitions stretch far beyond mere sustenance. They're artists, alchemists, and sometimes outright showmen, concocting elaborate banquets that double as political theater. Mainstream history credits the Renaissance with rediscovering lost knowledge from the classics to cutting-edge sciences, but food is part of that rediscovery. Ingredients once forgotten or dismissed return with flair. Artichokes, asparagus, citrus fruits, and sugar start to appear on plates like rare jewels. You watch a chef named Bartolomeo nervously preparing a feast for a visiting dignitary. His specialty, zuppa alla Fiorentina, a soup rich with greens, cheese, and broth flavored with herbs that seem to dance on the tongue. His hands move deftly, but you sense his anxiety. One slip, one burned crust, and the family's reputation could be toast. A quirky tidbit. Renaissance cooks often experimented with sugar as a medicine as much as a sweetener. Elaborate sugar sculptures adorned tables not just to impress, but because sugar was believed to purify the blood. It's the era when food and medicine blur a delicious placebo of sorts. Historians still debate how much influence the New World had on European kitchens at this stage. Tomatoes, potatoes, and chocolate, the culinary game changers, are just trickling in. Some chefs embrace these exotic gifts immediately. Others eyed them with suspicion. You can almost hear the first whispers of poisonous nightshade as tomatoes waver on the menu. Bartolomeo confides that many recipes circulate orally or in handwritten notebooks. The printing press helps spread knowledge, but chefs jealously guard their secrets, especially spice blends. You realize culinary innovation is as much about competition as creativity. Outside the Palazzo Street, vendors sell frittelle fried dough balls, dusted with honey and early nod to comfort food. You bite into one, the warm sweetness, reminding you that even amidst grand feasts, the people's food pulses with life and tradition. But the Renaissance kitchen is a double-edged sword. As kitchens grow opulent, many old recipes and cooking methods fade, lost in the chase for novelty and extravagance. Some ancient grains and vegetables quietly vanish from menus, supplanted by imported favorites. You imagine the chefs who resisted change, steadfast in their roots, pushed aside by the glitter and gold. Their culinary voices dim, their knowledge slipping beneath the marble floors. The fire crackles softly in Bartolomeo's kitchen. The past and future blend in the steam rising from his pots. You savor the moment knowing this fusion of old and new will shape cuisine for centuries, even as some chefs fall into the shadows of history. You glide into the bustling kitchens of 17th century France, where culinary ambition ignites a revolution as fiery as the hearts themselves. This is the age of Louis XIV, the Sun King whose court at Versailles dazzles with grandeur power, and the first true celebrity chefs. You trail behind a cook named François, newly appointed sous chef in the royal kitchens, sweating beneath layers of linen and ambition. The air is thick with aromas, roasting game simmering sauces, and the unmistakable scent of butter melting over fresh bread. You can almost hear the clatter of silverware and whispered secrets of recipes guarded like state treasures. This era births haute cuisine, a precise, refined style that transforms cooking into a disciplined art. François works under the legendary chef La Barrenne, who publishes one of Europe's first true cookbooks, emphasizing fresh ingredients, careful seasoning, and delicate sauces like velouté and béchamel. The kitchen is no longer a chaotic fire pit. It's a laboratory of taste and texture. Here's a mainstream fact: the development of the French mother sauces marks a culinary milestone, still taught in kitchens worldwide. These sauces are the backbone of countless dishes, proof that a humble roux can hold centuries of tradition. But there's a quirky undercurrent too. Chefs at Versailles experiment with sugar in bizarre ways: candied flowers, sculpted sugar animals, and even sugar thrones for desserts. This excess isn't just about flavor, but a display of wealth and control, as sugar was still a precious commodity imported from distant colonies. Historians still argue whether this culinary opulence contributed to the social divides that fueled the French Revolution decades later. Was food a symbol of power or a subtle form of resistance? You sense a simmering tension beneath the gilded banquet tables. François shares stories of royal banquets, where dishes arrive in impossible sequences: cold, then hot, then cold again, designed to impress rather than satisfy hunger. You smile at the idea of overeating to look refined, the original food coma, before the phrase even existed. Yet, beyond the palace, everyday cooking remains humble. Peasants still rely on porridges, bread, and seasonal vegetables, occasionally tasting the luxury filtered down like rare drops of wine. The chefs who serve these simple tables rarely see their names in history, but their resilience flavors the land. You step outside Versailles and inhale the cool night air, scented faintly with lavender and roasted chestnuts. You ponder how many recipes vanished in the glare of candlelit extravagance, lost to history, overshadowed by spectacle. The fire in François' kitchen hums low now. Somewhere between the refined sauces and sugar sculptures, you catch the faintest echo of forgotten cooks, whose flavors once filled the hearts of simpler homes. You sip a spoonful of rich broth, thick and nourishing. The past lingers on your tongue, a reminder that behind every feast is a story of survival, adaptation, and quiet extinction. You step into the smoky kitchens of 18th century England, where the Industrial Revolution's steam engines begin to roar, and society shifts in ways that echo through every pot and pan. Here, cooking faces new challenges and unexpected innovations. As the world moves faster, louder, and hungrier, you follow a cook named Mary, whose days start before dawn in a bustling urban household. Coal fires roar beneath iron pots, filling the air with soot and the sharp scent of boiling broth. Mary's hands move quickly, stirring porridge, baking bread, and chopping root vegetables imported from distant farms. Mainstream fact: this era sees the rise of printed cookbooks aimed at the growing middle class, empowering home cooks with recipes adapted for new kitchen technologies like cast iron stoves and baking ovens. Food becomes a marker of social status as much as nourishment. Yet, Mary juggles the tension between tradition and novelty. She's fascinated by a recent invention called marmalade, a tangy, bittersweet preserve made from Seville oranges. The story goes that a shipwrecked captain's wife accidentally cooked the fruit into a sticky spread, a quirky twist on culinary accident and invention. Historians still argue whether industrialization improved or diminished the quality of everyday food. Did mass production and urbanization lead to greater access, or did it erode the soul of cooking? Mary feels the weight of this question as she watches her neighbors rely on cheap processed foods and canned goods. You wander into the smoky corners of London's East End, where immigrant cooks introduce spices and recipes from across the British Empire, curries, chutneys, and fragrant breads. The kitchens are crowded and chaotic, but they hum with the energy of cultures mixing and flavors blending. Mary takes a break to sip a thin, bitter black tea with a splash of milk, the quintessential British comfort. You realize how this simple ritual embodies a history of colonial trade, social customs, and quiet rebellion against hard days. There's a quirky side note cooks often used: peas, putting a thick puree of split peas as a cheap feeling staple. It's sometimes served with herring or salted pork, a reminder that culinary creativity often springs from necessity rather than choice. You notice that recipes start to include detailed measurements and timing, a scientific approach replacing guesswork. This reflects a broader Enlightenment faith in reason and progress, even as some lament the loss of inherited family secrets. You step back to watch Mary prepare a humble supper: cabbage stew thickened with barley, a crusty loaf, and a spoonful of marmalade tucked into the corner. The smells remind you of the past, but hint at the future, a food world poised between extinction and invention. You close your eyes and taste the mingling flavors of coal smoke, tangy marmalade, and the earthiness of root vegetables, flavors forged in the smoky heart of industrial change. You drift into the kitchens of the early 20th century, a world caught between tradition and rapid modernity. Electric lights buzz softly overhead, and refrigerators hum quietly in the corner, promising freshness, but also changing the very nature of food and cooking. You watch Clara, a home cook, navigating this brave new world with a mix of excitement and nostalgia. Her kitchen is a blend of old and new. A cast iron stove still crackles with life, but a shiny electric mixer sits patiently on the countertop. Clara reads recipes from glossy magazines where pages overflow with colorful photos and promises of easier, tastier meals. Mainstream history credits this era with the birth of convenience cooking, canned goods, frozen peas, boxed cake mixes, ushering in an age where time-saving matters as much as flavor. It's the dawn of modern home cooking where science and marketing start shaping what lands on the dinner table. A quirky tidbit: Clara's grandmother swears by mock turtle soup, a Victorian-era concoction made from calf's head, now replaced by gelatin and meat extracts in cheaper versions. This odd dish is a testament to how recipes evolve or fade, often reduced to shadows of their former selves. Historians still argue how much convenience foods improved nutrition or degraded it. Did refrigerators and canned peas really free up time for family bonding? Or did they usher in an era of bland uniformity? Clara wrestles with this every evening as she tries to balance tradition with practicality. You notice that international flavors begin slipping quietly into Clara's kitchen. Italian pasta, Chinese, stir-fry, Mexican chilies brought home by returning soldiers, immigrants, and globe-trotting adventurers. The melting pot of tastes grows richer and more diverse. Clara hums softly as she chops onions, remembering her mother's Sunday roast, and the hearty stews simmering on winter nights. Yet she also marvels at the latest kitchen gadget, a toaster that browns bread in minutes, a small revolution on the countertop. You pause to savor the smell of freshly baked bread mingling with the electric hum and faint scent of coffee brewing nearby. It's comfort and progress blended in a way only this era can manage. But lurking beneath the gleaming surface is a slow quietness, the loss of hands-on skill, the disappearance of certain heirloom recipes, and the gradual extinction of foodways once passed down by word of mouth. You catch Clara's wistful glance toward a faded handwritten recipe card pinned to the fridge, a reminder that even in progress, The past clings, gently refusing to be forgotten. The kitchen light flickers softly. You lean in close, tasting the rich complexity of history, folded into every meal made and every story left untold. You now slip quietly into the kitchens of the late 20th century, a world transforming at dizzying speed. Supermarkets, sprawling microwaves beeping and frozen dinners, lining shelves like colorful soldiers ready for battle. The pace of life accelerates, and with it the way people cook, eat, and remember food changes profoundly. You watch Alex, a young professional navigating this new era of convenience and choice. His kitchen is compact, but efficient, filled with gadgets promising faster meals and easier cleanup. The refrigerator hums, softly stocked with prepackaged meals and fresh produce, both imported from faraway places. Mainstream fact: the rise of global food chains and processed food reshapes diets worldwide, often at the cost of traditional cooking knowledge. People increasingly trade time-honored recipes for microwavable options, ready-to-eat snacks, and instant gratification. But there's a quirky twist. Some chefs and food enthusiasts rebel against this trend by collecting and reviving nearly extinct recipes, forming food archaeology clubs dedicated to hunting down forgotten flavors from centuries past. They believe that what we lose on the fast lane, we must rediscover in slow bites. Historians still debate whether globalization enriches or dilutes culinary heritage. Does international fusion cuisine celebrate diversity, or does it accelerate the extinction of unique food cultures? Alex, scrolling through his phone, wonders if his great-grandmother's recipes will survive in a digital world. You notice that the ambient sounds of this kitchen include the soft beep of timers, the whirl of blenders, and the clink of plastic containers. It's a different symphony than the crackle of wood fires or the clang of copper pots, but one that speaks to modern life's rhythms. Alex cracks open a package of instant noodles, a guilty pleasure, and chuckles at the irony. This humble meal traces its roots back to post-war Japan, a culinary invention, born of scarcity and innovation. Yet, here it is a global staple, both beloved and derided. Outside the window, city lights flicker and the hum of traffic pulses. The old markets where farmers once sold fresh local produce give way to aisles of branded goods, each promising convenience or health, but often at the expense of freshness and connection. You realize that with every shortcut gained, something slips away: the time to slow down, to gather with family around the fire, to taste with curiosity and care. Alex sighs, longing for the stories behind the food, the memories infused in every dish. The microwave beeps again, and Alex smiles wistfully, savoring the comforting warmth but missing the crackle of an open flame, the rhythm of a hand chopping vegetables, the hum of a kitchen alive with human touch. You lean back, hearing the soft echo of traditions fading even as new ones quietly emerge in their place. You settle into the quiet, dim light of a 21st century kitchen, where the glow of screens outshines the flicker of flames, and the hum of smart appliances fills the air with a gentle buzz. It's a world where food is as much about ethics and identity as it is about flavor. A world caught between abundance and loss. You watch Jamie, a mindful cook who scours farmers' markets, favors plant-based meals, and experiments with fermenting vegetables in glass jars. Jamie's kitchen smells faintly of herbs, sourdough starter, and a hint of coffee, the comforting aroma of care and intention. A mainstream truth surfaces with rising awareness of climate change and sustainability. People rethink what and how they eat, often embracing local seasonal foods and reducing waste. The global food system's impact is no longer invisible. It shapes every bite. But here's a quirky detail. Some culinary rebels revive ancient techniques like cooking in ashes or fermenting with wild yeasts as a way to reconnect with vanished foodways. They argue that these methods can resist industrial monotony and bring back lost flavors even if the process sometimes feels like a kitchen science experiment. Historians still argue whether this modern food renaissance can truly halt the ongoing extinction of culinary diversity, or if it's a nostalgic gesture amid inevitable change. Jamie wonders whether digital recipes and online communities will preserve or commodify these traditions. You notice the subtle hum of a compost bin in the corner and the soft glow of an app tracking food, miles, and carbon footprints. It's a world where every meal carries weight beyond taste, a meditation on stewardship and survival. Jamie slices a fresh tomato, vibrant and firm, its flavor a promise from the earth after seasons of neglect and renewal. You feel the connection between soil seed and story, fragile yet resilient. You reflect on how ancient cooks, from the smoky hearts of early humans to Versailles' grand kitchens, unknowingly set the stage for this moment, a dance of extinction and invention, loss and rediscovery. As the kitchen settles into a gentle quiet, you sense the unspoken promise that while some recipes may vanish, the human desire to gather, share, and nourish will always persist, flickering softly like a candle in the dark. The night deepens and you lean back, tasting the bittersweetness of endings and new beginnings. Now, slowing your breath and softening your thoughts, imagine the flickering flame of a fire, gently dimming its warmth, still lingering in the air around you. The stories of ancient kitchens, grand palaces, bustling cities, and mindful homes settle like a soft blanket over your mind. Remember, the past is never truly gone. It whispers in every meal, every shared bite, every flavor that lingers on your tongue. Rest now, knowing that the cycles of life and taste weave on, quietly turning as you drift deeper into calm, peaceful sleep. Your journey through history's kitchens may be ending, but the story of food connection and survival continues softly, endlessly, just beyond the horizon of your dreams. Good night and sweet dreams.